All right, Beth Hussey,
Yes.
thanks so much for taking the time.
Yeah. Thanks for having me. This will be fun.
Yeah, for sure. So you are a staff training expert. I think that's fair to say. What,
Yeah.
what's your background in the bar and restaurant industry? I know you've been in it for years and years at this point.
I have. Yes. I don't want to age myself, but I have been in the restaurant business for over 35 years. I'm actually the youngest of seven kids, and all seven of us, all but one, is has been in the restaurant industry for our whole life. So it's basically coursing through our veins. It feels like.
Is
Um,
everybody still in the area, the Detroit area?
No, they're not. There's a couple of them in the Detroit area. I'm currently the only one of the seven who actually owns their own restaurant. So I
Got
guess
it.
that makes me I'm winning if if you're keeping score.
Always are.
Yeah, yeah. No, they're kind of scattered all around the country.
Got it. So what kind of place were you working in growing up?
Um, well, actually my dad had a bar when I was very little called the Red Nose Tavern, which is so funny. But basically, when I became, in my early adulthood, my dad and brother owned a restaurant in a place called Clarkston, Michigan, which
Okay.
is a suburb of Detroit, and that was a seafood and steakhouse in a really busy place. That's sort of where I guess I really got my start. Before that, I was after high school, I kind of traveled all around the United States. I was sort of following the season in like
Nice.
resorts and tropical places. So
Cool.
I go to Phoenix and up to Washington State and Oregon and California, and I just kind of traveled from state to state, bartending and serving in restaurants. And then I guess when I decided that was getting old is when I came to help my dad and brother at the restaurant in Clarkston.
Got it. And
Yeah.
so from there, you were at that point, you were kind of like, I'm going to make a career of this. Is that when the decision was made?
Yeah, so I started there. My brother, even though I had been serving and bartending really kind of all over the country, he made me start as a busser, just to be a jerk. I think just because they wanted something to laugh at for a while. But I sort of worked my way up the ranks at that restaurant. Before I became a manager at that restaurant, that's really where my love of training began. The restaurant at the time. So this was back in the early '90s.
Sure.
They did. We were busy, very busy steakhouse, and they did not have a training program whatsoever. And so I sort of, asked my dad and brother if I could take over the training because it was non-existent, and so that's sort of where I got my love for training. And then I went on to manage. We opened several locations of that concept, kind of all around the Metro Detroit area. I kind of went
Got
around
it.
opening some of those places, and then. And then you want me to kind of continue on and sort of give you my
Yeah,
whole
just
my
so
whole
yeah,
con.
we're kind of trying to paint the picture of like, okay, you're a staffing expert. How
Yep,
did we get there? So you
sure.
the first one was at this family restaurant
Yep,
that you guys
yep,
owned, and then
yep.
the
So I just
multiple locations of it, and then what was next in that journey?
Yep, and then so I kind of, I did my due at my family's restaurant. I decided to branch out on my own, open several other restaurants. I learned somewhere along the line that I absolutely loved opening restaurants because,
Okay,
I knew that I loved training. I developed a really unique way at my family's restaurant of training servers and bartenders, which I'll tell you about in a minute.
sure,
But taking that sort of unique methodology of training and also combining it with opening a new place, it's like the Super Bowl of training, right? Instead of training
right,
one person, training 50 people all
everybody.
at once. Yeah, and so that was exciting for me. So I loved opening places. Actually, in my career, I've opened 16 or 17 full service restaurants from earliest construction stages all the way to day-to-day operations. So I kind of
Wow.
went around opening restaurants for other folks, and then my sort of first chance to be a partner or sort of own a restaurant I call it sweat equity. I was a sweat equity owner
Mm-hmm.
in a place that I developed and really proud of called One-Eyed Betty's, which
Yep.
is a craft beer bar in Ferndale, Michigan. So that was sort of my baby. I had a silent partner there, and I got to kind of create the concept and run it. We were really lucky. We opened at sort of in our neck of the woods. It was sort of right before the craft beer boom hit. So
Perfect timing then, huh?
yeah, it was perfect timing. It was a lot of fun. It was wildly successful. And so that was my first, what I'll say, owning a restaurant. And then with that same silent partner, we went on to open another concept, which was a Italian and wine concept.
Okay.
And sort of, I took that sort of multi-rotating tap idea and translated that into a wine concept, which was really kind of innovative and cool. That place was called Pops for Italian, also in Ferndale.
Yep.
And then that I got that up and running and then decided to move on and open my own place, which is where I am now. It's my first sort of solo venture. I have a business partner who is the chef who I had come with me from One-Eyed Betty's and Pops.
Nice.
And we did this project together, and it's called Hazel's, and it's a very popular seafood concept in a city called Birmingham, which also is a suburb of Detroit. So
So far, well, congratulations. That's great.
thank you.
That's the
Thanks.
this sounds hard, basically.
Yeah.
Um,
Well,
but so far, so you've talked about your staff training at a steakhouse slash seafood place, your staff training
mhm,
at a craft beer place, you're doing it at a wine place, now you're doing it
mhm,
at a seafood place. That's a lot
yeah.
of
It
different
is.
stuff.
It is. It is. It's funny because like all those places, start with craft beer and then wine, especially like multi, changing like,
Yep,
and
rotating all
then
the time.
now, yeah, I'm starting to notice a trend is that my restaurant now I couldn't pick a harder concept to run. The seafood concept, we actually change our menu drastically 4 times a year. So we sort of follow the season of the crab, so to speak. So right
Okay.
now, Maryland blue crab is in season, so we've got a very eastern, we call it Eastern Shore. It's a very, Eastern Maryland, Baltimore kind of themed restaurant. In the winter, stone crab is in season, so it's a Florida
That's
theme.
Florida. Okay.
Yeah, we moved to lobster in the summer and then Alaskan king crab in the fall. So our menu, literally the whole menu, the whole theme, look and feel of the restaurant changes every 3 months drastically. So it's like opening a new restaurant
No
every
kidding.
yeah, it's crazy. 4 times
And
a year.
and you've been through the cycle once at this point?
Yeah, we've been through the cycle 3 times. It's actually a really interesting story. How much time do we have, just out of curiosity?
We have as much time as we need. We'll
Okay.
probably, yeah, I usually split this up into like 2 weeks probably we'll do this one. So like the
Okay.
first half and then we'll do the second half the week following in the newsletter.
Okay. I
Yeah.
do I do have it's a really good story, and if folks that are in the restaurant business are listening to these, it's a fun story to tell. It doesn't necessarily speak to the training piece, but
Let's
if you
hear
don't
it.
mind, I'll kind of tell
Yeah.
it how this idea of the rotating concept evolved.
Yeah.
Um, so it we were in our first year. So I had great success with the beer concept and the wine concept in Ferndale, and sort of got a reputation of being really good at what we do, and we're a really popular, trendy place. All the cool kids went, and really enjoyed a lot of success. So when I moved on to open my own restaurant in Birmingham, I was expecting to, hit the ground with the same type of successes. Like I said, we had a pretty well-known reputation in our market.
Right.
Um, so we opened, and the concept wasn't, it wasn't a beer concept, it wasn't a wine concept. Really, what we were trying to be was just a neighborhood concept, because we were in a city that was very affluent, right? So
Okay.
a lot of fancy restaurants here. So there's like no place that was family friendly, no place you could go get, a burger and a beer. So we were trying to be a friendly neighborhood restaurant, and
Hmm.
we opened, and we did okay. We opened just before the holidays. It's a big 10,000 square foot restaurant, so it's a lot of space. half of the space is private dining, right? So we opened just before the holidays, so we had lots of parties, and we were busy. It was great. Things were going good, but then, we made it through the holidays, and then along comes January, February, and sales went down a little bit. And if I'm being honest, wasn't experiencing like the same kind of raging success that we had experienced at the other two places.
Hmm.
So, I'm like and it's my first, I actually have my own skin in the game in this one. It's,
Right.
everything I own is on the line for this restaurant.
Ugh.
So, I'm starting to bite my nails a little bit. And we're cruising right along. We were way over budget on the build out. So, I was having a hard time catching up financially, really behind on all the bills. It was really kind of a dicey time period for me. And then right around, I want to say like the end of March or beginning of April, our sales, which weren't great to begin with, took like a 40% like nosedive. Like our
Okay.
sales overnight, one week we were here, the next week we were down here, and it was like, oh my God, it was terrifying. The next week, same thing, sales were down. And I was new to this city. And so I kind of asked around to some of my other, fellow restaurateurs, like, what the heck is going on? And they said, oh, it's spring break in Birmingham. So remember, we're in an affluent community. There's lots of families.
Oh,
And so all these people, travel during spring break. They pick up their family
right.
and they leave town. So I was shocked that, spring break could have such a huge impact. Like all my fellow
Totally.
restaurateurs said, sales always drop during spring break time. And, of course, in Birmingham, it's not just 1 week. It's there's the private schools, the Catholic schools, the
Right.
public schools. So like spring break, like takes place over the course of a month, it felt like.
Right. And
Um,
maybe Easter falls on one of them, or maybe it's its own thing, like it was this year. I know. For
exactly. Yep. That's exactly right. So it was pretty scary. So I'm
totally.
like, man, if and like I said, big 10,000 square foot restaurant, and we don't have a patio. Like there's no outdoor component to our restaurant. It's a really nice place, but there's no patio. So I said to myself, man, if spring break can have that kind of an impact on our business, then we're going to be in trouble in the summertime. All
Mm.
right, because we don't have a patio. We're in Michigan, so there's lots of lakes around. So
Yep.
all these very wealthy people that live here, they're either in their summer homes, they're traveling far, far away, or they're at a restaurant, with a patio, or they're out on their boat. But
Hmm.
one thing they're not going to be, I realized quickly, was at Hazel's. Um, in a restaurant with no patio. So I was starting to panic, right? Because
Right.
still, spring break hit. I don't think, I was like, we're not going to make it through the summer. And, it's very common when restaurants open, they don't, a lot of restaurants don't make it through their first year.
Right.
It's hard. If you make it through that first year, then you're doing okay. So I started, Emily, the chef, my chef partner, and I were, starting to think. I said, we got to do something. We got to figure out a way to bring people that aren't from Birmingham to Birmingham and figure something out. And so one of the things we're known for is oysters, and
Okay.
we buy our oysters at the restaurant. We get our oysters. We're kind of a unique way we do it. We order oysters from small oyster farms, so
Hmm.
almost like craft oysters, like if you compare it to craft beer. But
Sure.
so they're harvesting oysters and overnighting them to us, so we kind of cut out the middleman. And so we're thinking, what can we do? What can we do? And folks in Michigan absolutely go crazy for lobster. Lobster's in season in the summertime, so we started thinking, let's do a lobster special. And there's a reason why people in Michigan can't get lobster very often, is because it's very expensive. And like to be
Hmm.
able to sell it in a restaurant, you'd have to charge so much, and it just doesn't make a ton of sense in Michigan to do. So it's few and far between to come across a lobster in Michigan. So I thought, well, if I can buy oysters straight from oyster farms, why can't I buy lobsters like that?
Right.
And so, my first, inclination was to ask my oyster people. They're like, yeah, no, we can't help you with that. We don't know anyone who does that with lobsters. So I basically, picked up the phone book, not really, I went to the
Yeah.
Google, and
Right.
I started calling like small like fishing operations on the coast of Maine, and found this one very small fishing operation and said, hey, are you willing to buy lobsters and overnight them to me? And they're like, well, we're willing to try it. And so I was able to get lobster for a good price, so I could do this like lobster
Oh.
dinner special. So while we're trying to like make our arrangements to get our lobster, we decided, well, if we're gonna do it, we sort of took a go big or go home approach, and we decided to do a just a full blown takeover. So we like scrapped our menu,
Uh-huh.
and called we named it the Lobster Pound, so Hazel's Lobster Pound, and we like turned our restaurant into like a lobster shack. We put red and white tablecloths on the tables, and
Yeah.
a lobster pound is a place on the coast of Maine, like on the streets. It's like you can pull off the road and grab a lobster, like at these little shacks. And so that's what we were trying to be, which is kind of tongue in cheek because we're in this big 10,000 square foot building. And anyway, so we decided let's just do a whole takeover, and we completely did a menu. We did like whole belly clams, which is something you can't find in Michigan, lobster rolls, whole lobster dinners, steamers, all this stuff you can only get on the coast of Maine.
Yep.
And we had a publicist write a press release that we're doing a lobster takeover. We plan to do it for 4 weeks. And she sent out the press release. The local newspaper picked up the story and ran it. And, the minute that story ran, our phone started ringing and it never stopped. Like,
That had to feel
the
great.
reservations just started going ching, ching, ching. It was so cool because, like, we went, and then the day that we scheduled to start it, we had a line waiting at the door for us to open
Ooh,
at 11
nice.
a.m. For lobster dinners, which is so funny because it's like, not that it's all that unique because other people do lobster, but for some reason the idea that we had a guy fishing for us and sending us lobsters, it was just outrageously successful. It quadrupled our
Awesome.
sales. We
Oh.
we were busy for lunch and dinner,
In
all
summer when
between
you don't have a patio and you just
summer
got
when I don't
owned
have
in
a
spring break. Oof.
yeah, it was outrageously successful. I mean, and it's funny because, like, I had restaurateurs coming in and, like, scratching their heads going, how the hell did you do this? Because most promotions are like, half off pizza, or kids eat free, or, buy one, get one, and they have to discount. But instead, our prices, like, went up exponentially. We were charging $30 for a lobster roll, and
Mm-hmm.
$50 for a lobster dinner. So like our prices went up, and it was just outrageously successful. So it went for 4 weeks. The reservations never slowed, so we extended it for another 4 weeks. We did it for 8 weeks. Totally saved our butts. Like
Awesome.
we would not have made it through our first year if it weren't for that. And so it was really lucky. We kind of took a swing. And then, when it ended, we went back to our original menu, and it was like, meh, party's
Oh,
over.
yeah, right.
With no more lobster. And everyone was like, you girls should do like more takeovers, and begging me to think of another takeover to do. And I was like, heck no, because if I can count on a summer like that every summer, then we're gonna be a-okay. I'm not gonna
Yeah.
attempt to do another takeover. There's no way it could be as successful. So we ended that in the beginning of summer. We went through all of fall and all of the holidays with just so sales.
Okay.
And everyone, just the whole time, customers, vendors, employees, everyone was begging us to think of another takeover. So, after, 4 or 5 months, I was like, okay, fine, we'll try to do another one. And so we planned this other takeover, a Florida themed takeover for January after the holidays.
Mm-hmm.
Stone crab was the star of the show.
Right.
And same thing, we did it, kind of made you feel like you were on spring break. We did frozen drinks in plastic cups and the whole bit. Like, we went all out Florida theme, and alligator gumbo, stuff like that.
Ooh,
And
yum.
it was the same thing, same success. Sales quadrupled. We did it for 8 weeks. It was outrageously successful, which I was really surprised. And I was like, okay, well, I guess
Yes,
I
this
guess
is
this
my
is
life
what
now.
yeah, this is my life now. So we
Oh,
decided to like develop, 4 takeovers to do all year long, and we planned a trip. My partner and I, we went out to the East Coast. We flew out to Baltimore and drove down the East Coast, eating at every crab shack along the way because we try to be as authentic as we possibly can. And
Hmm.
when we left on that trip, there wasn't one single case of COVID in the United States at that time. And
Ugh.
5 days later, when we were flying back, it was starting to make its way. And then, 2 weeks later, restaurants were closed. So COVID hit, and then, crazy. Then we had 2 years of just weirdness with the state closing us and
Totally.
cargo capacity and all that. So
And then,
anyway,
yeah.
it's a pretty interesting story. It saved our butts. We changed our concept. We've got the 4 takeovers now developed. It's like I said, it's the Florida right now is Eastern Shore, then lobster in the summer, and then the West Coast with Alaskan king crab and Dungeness in the fall. And it's
So
pretty cool.
it's not just the menu, it sounds like. You guys like make over the interior too. Or was
We
that
do.
just for the lobster?
Yeah, as much as we can, tablecloths, and we change the dishes, the way we serve. We try to kind of copy as much like what they do in that, regional area of the country.
Hmm.
Paper boats and stuff like that, and bibs and all kinds of stuff. Like
Right.
right now, it's Maryland blue crab, where that's the crab. They're the little ones that you order by the dozen, and so
Right.
we cover all the tables in paper. And when you order a dozen crab, we bring it to the table and dump it out,
Dump it out.
right on the
Nice.
yeah. Give everyone
That's
a
cool.
mallet and a pick, and it's pretty cool. Yeah, it's a lot of fun, but it's hard. It's like opening a new restaurant. Even though we've developed it, we've been through the cycle. Because the pandemic screwed it up. We've been through the lobster one now, I think 4 times actually, or 3 times. I don't know, but it. I think it'll get easier over time. That's the hope.
That's the hope, right?
But still, you always have new employees every time, and you have to train them on the new menu items. Like every 3 months, they just start to get really used to the menu, and then it
Boom.
changes. We change the whole bar. We do like drinks. Also regional drinks at that time, so it's pretty cool.
Suppliers, have you been able to use the same suppliers for everything throughout?
Yeah, kind of. The pandemic did put a little bit of a wrench in that. It's a little tricky, but we do get the lobsters overnighted, every time, and
Nice.
it's lucky for us. It's a big popular place. People in this community can afford the kind of seafood we're selling, so we're lucky there, and we go through a lot of it. So
Yeah.
that's the good news. But
That's a cool
that
story.
sort of takes me full circle to the story is that when that pandemic hit, we weren't quite a year old, and we closed our restaurant completely. We didn't do a lick of carryout before the pandemic, so we didn't even think that we could attempt that.
Hmm.
And that is when, first time in my adult life, first time in my career where I had a little bit of time on my
Had some
hands.
time, yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, it was very scary, of course. I'm sure you remember, like for restaurants,
Yeah.
nobody knew what the heck was going to happen. You didn't know if we were ever going to open again, and I was panicking really and climbing the walls. And I decided to use that time to work on this passion project of mine, which is training.
Hmm.
And I dove in, and I decided to figure out a way to turn my unique way of training servers and bartenders into a technology platform.
So we are going to spend a bunch of time on that. And
Yes.
but before we get there,
Yeah.
let's talk about where training usually goes wrong. I've been through training, let's see, I've worked at 4 bars and restaurants.
Hmm.
Never
So you know.
great.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No.
Like,
It's. I say like here's how 9 out of 10, and it's probably even more than that. But here's how 9 out of 10 restaurants train their employees. Well, first of all, anymore it's like you check a pulse, follow my finger, and
oh
then
yeah,
say
right now, right.
at a table. So a lot of times there's like no attempt to train anymore whatsoever, just because restaurants are experiencing the sheer desperation of needing someone.
Right.
Uh, but the way training normally goes in restaurants is, the new employee will show up on their first day. all excited. They'll check in with the manager who most likely forgot they were even coming, right? It's like the oh shit moment. And so the manager then just ends up sticking them with whoever happens to be the best server on the floor that night, right?
Hmm.
And then that server who, is wondering what he did to deserve this punishment, they will just agree to let him tag along, and he'll attempt to show him the ropes, with no direction or training materials or information of any kind whatsoever.
Yeah.
And that's the way it goes. It's like, fingers crossed, the guy doing the training is having a good day, or a good server. And so it's so interesting, because like then that starts the cycle. So now that employee that just got trained poorly is likely going to train the next person, right? And they've got no example of how to train well. And the big thing I always say is, like, no two employees, especially in regard, like, this applies to every department in the restaurant, but just for the sake of this conversation, I'm just going to talk about servers and bartenders.
Sure.
But no two employees can say they've had the same training experience. Nobody goes through the same things. Nobody learns the same stuff. Who knows if they learn the right stuff? Like, in most cases, they're learning, like, how many times would a trainer say, well, this is what they want you to do, but I'm going to tell you that the way I like to do it is this way, right? Like, that whole methodology.
So we're supposed to measure out the wine before we pour it, but I got a good eye for it.
Exactly. Exactly. Yeah, but who's got time to get that little
I mean,
picture?
I got all this stuff going on. Like, I'm not gonna.
Yeah.
No way.
Exactly. Yeah, right. Do as I say, not as I do, kind of stuff. So
Totally.
it's funny because, like, when I was when my restaurant was struggling, back to the story I just told before the during the spring break time, and I was hiring people, and I was trying to think of anything I could, like, what am I going to do to make this restaurant a success? I got to make it through my first year. I've got this. I'm a good operator. I'm a good restaurateur. I've been involved in a lot of really, really successful operations. I can't fail, right? So anyway, it honestly felt like, I have these servers. I felt like they had my life in their hands. Like, they're going to the tables and they're talking to the guests. What are they saying to the customers? Like, when the guest asks a question, what are they saying? Like, God help us. Like, do they have the right answer? Are they saying the right things? It's a scary feeling, especially for independent restaurateurs.
Totally.
Yeah. So it's the old, the restaurants that I say that, like, consider themselves great at training are places that use a 3-ring binder, right? It's like this big giant 3-ring binder. It's filled with pages and pages and pages of, mostly useless information for servers and bartenders. I mean, why does a server and bartender need to know the recipe of the gravy? Like, no guest is going to ask that question. They need to know, how does it taste, or what does it look like, right? So
They need to know, like, how to key stuff into the POS system, like,
right. Yeah.
like,
It's like they train, and it's, if they read so they have a 3-ring binder filled with pages and pages of useless information that they're expected to read and retain, which, you can't, it's very hard to read and retain, especially long documents that aren't interesting.
totally.
And, and then the manager will, threaten them with a test the whole time they're training. So they're reading this in a state of sheer panic, like, how am I going to commit this to memory?
Right. On their own time.
On their
Probably.
own time. Yeah. And what's funny is, like, the, chances of all the information in that 3-ring binder being up to date and accurate is, little to none.
Totally.
And yeah, so it's like, how many times, like, I ask this of people all the time, like, how many times do you go through training at a restaurant where the material, like, if they give you any materials, do they say, oh, no, we don't have that item anymore, don't pay attention to that, but, now we have this. And
yeah,
so
I can visualize one of those binders that I was given, and there's just different color pen crossing out sentences throughout, and it's just like, how am I supposed to take this seriously?